I'm Reverend Cindy Grimes, and I'm the senior minister here. And this morning, I'm speaking, well, for the whole month, actually the whole year, we're talking this topic here called Living the Science of Mind, which is a philosophy that we teach here in Centers for Spiritual Living. And my talk for today is called A Call to Action. It's what we called our Membership Sunday. So today I'm going to focus on why we're here, our mission, our vision, where we see ourselves going forward, and what's coming next for our center and for our community. And I think it's very exciting, and I hope you catch this vision. Yesterday, Donna and I went to the Empower Music and Arts Festival, which is happening in Tampa. They had a guest speaker that we wanted to hear, but the festival itself is a musical festival. There are people from all over the country that are here. They come and converge in Florida once a year, and it's people who sing the music that we sing here in our centers. It's just really positive, uplifting music, and it's an opportunity for people to get together and sing together, and it's just a great time. In fact, several of us will be going back this evening for a musical concert. It's kind of like their version of the Grammys, Aussie Music Night. There's music in all different categories, like music for social advocacy, music for healing, and so on and so forth. And they give awards for that, and there's a great concert tonight. So if you're interested in going, tap my shoulder after service, and we'll see about carpooling together. At any rate, Don and I went. So Empower Music, a community dedicated to creating positive global change through music, writing, and the spoken word. And their mission is to transform lives and create a positive change in the world. You can tell a lot about an organization by its mission, can't you? Yes. Yes. So we had a wonderful time. The speaker that was supposed to be there that I really wanted to see was a gentleman by the name of Father Gregory Boyle. He runs the biggest prison ministry in the country out of LA called Homeboy Industries. So I was very interested in hearing him, but unfortunately, he didn't show up. His mother passed away, and they had to bring in a guest speaker at the last minute. Who is this gentleman right here? Sean Pica is the executive director of something called Hudson Link for higher education in prison. What they do at Hudson Link is they provide college education for people who are imprisoned. Now, apparently that was a very common thing throughout our country up until, I think it was 1994, when those programs were pulled out of almost all of the prisons. And there's maybe a dozen around the country that are still offering college education, and they happen to have a half dozen of them in their area that they service. So the national recidivism rate for people who have been imprisoned and then going back out into the world, they end up going back to prison. 67% of most people that go into prison are back within 3 years. That's 2/3. 2/3 of people. Within 5 years, we jump up to more than 3/4. Can you imagine someone spending a whole prison sentence, could be years and years, and ending up right back in? It's just insanity. Well, in this program, if people go through their program, they get their college education, the recidivism rate for these folks coming out of prison drops down to 4%. 4%. Does that sound like something that's working? Yes. Does that sound like something maybe that should be replicated in some other areas? Yes. Because here's the cost of incarceration. $60,000 a person in the state of New York is what it costs to keep someone incarcerated. One individual for a year. $60,000. What it costs to educate that same individual in that same year, $5,000. Right? And we're dropping that recidivism rate down to 4%. Now, what makes this story and what made this speaker particularly compelling for me was his, let me go back. Excuse me, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the program before I tell you about him. They have programs in 6 correctional facilities. They partner with 7 colleges. These numbers are lower. This is what I was able to find online, and I didn't jot down what he said yesterday. But 690 alumni plus returning to their homes and to their communities as role models. That's a big number, don't you think? They have right now over 575 students enrolled. They have awarded, and I know that number was small as well because I heard a bigger one, 534 college degrees awarded, and then 85% of their graduates are gainfully employed in social services within 3 months.
Wow.
Incredible, incredible numbers. All of that alone was impressive enough. When I heard this guy's story, it was just really, it was mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house yesterday. 16 years in prison and 3 college degrees, how one man found redemption through education. This man was 16 years old when he committed the crime that landed him in prison. He had a 24-year sentence. He ended up serving 16 years of that sentence. Apparently game time in New York works a little bit differently than it does in Florida. So he served his 16 years. He is out now. He has been out for 16 years, and he earned 3 college degrees while he was behind bars. Here was the story, the backstory Don and I didn't get to hear yesterday because he didn't speak it. He had a friend when he was in high school who was being terribly abused by her father in her home. She was being sexually assaulted on a regular basis. And she wondered aloud and spoke to him, what would it take to get this man out of my life? And he took her on. He did it, and he did it for her. He shot her father dead in the driveway of their home, and 5 bullets and took his life. And so here he is, 16 years old. He's not much taller than I am. Imagine a 16-year-old that is sentenced now as an adult to spend 24 years of his life in prison, which is what the sentence was. So I want to tell you some of his story, and here he is. Here he is today with one of the graduates of this program. This is from an article on his website. He says, first of all, I woke up in a place I didn't know existed. I thought my life was over. These were his words when he got his prison sentence. He said, as a ninth grader in prison, Sean was one of the most educated men in the facility.
Wow.
Did you hear that? At ninth grade education, he was one of the most educated people in the facility. This was the late 80s. Each inmates used to have like maybe a 5-minute phone call with their families to communicate with them. Many of these people, obviously, if he's in 9th grade and he's got the best education, lots of these folks can't read. So they would come to him and they would ask him to read their letters from home. And he would do that. And he says, I'm not a tough guy. Well, let me go back. I'll just read how it's written here. He was one of the most educated men in the facility. When others asked for help, Sean began reading children's books to his fellow inmates. The men hung on every word, eager to learn how to read and write themselves. He quickly learned that education was a commodity when you don't have it. So he says, I'm not a tough guy. Imagine this little man, little tiny skinny 16-year-old kid, and the biggest guy in the compound is walking across to have words with him. And that was one of the gentlemen that handed him a letter and said, I can't read this. Would you read it for me? Inmates began coming to Sean for help communicating with their families. As they did, he began to witness the community that education fosters in a culture where you don't do anything for free. Unexpectedly, Sean uncovered the power of service. Big Al, an inmate who measured up to his name, recruited Sean to participate in a community youth program that brought troubled teens into the prison once a month. Sitting among those teens his age, Sean began sharing his perspective about prison and family and what it's like to feel like you have let everyone down. Sean vividly recalls breaking down in tears. It was the first time he cried in years. Oh, and by the way, his parents were law enforcement officers. So imagine the drama, the letdown, right, to his family, to everything. As he talked to the teens, his age, his vulnerability began knocking down walls, and something changed for him that day. Through participation in the program that eventually led to him leading it, Sean learned how sharing his story in a way that helps others is truly healing, and he credits those experiences as a turning point in his life. Without an opportunity to improve himself in prison, Sean reflects, he would have returned to his community 2 decades later no better than he was when he left it. He said, we foster community in a place where you're not supposed to have community. One way to keep a person, a prisoner is to keep him from having community, because when no one talks, the largest cell block is merely a warehouse. Education gives inmates a shared objective, something bigger than themselves to work toward, because when you believe in something bigger than yourself, your life changes. I love that quote. I love it so much I put it on your program. When you believe in something bigger than yourself, your life changes. And I had a turning point myself. It's probably about 30 years ago now, and I have shared this from time to time, so I don't know if you've heard it. If you have, forgive me. But I worked in social services for half of my professional career. The other half of my career, I published a parenting magazine. But back in the early days, in fact, it was even before Grady and I got married, it was the time we met. I was working as a victim advocate in the state attorney's office. Now, I also come from a law enforcement family. My dad is a police officer, my husband's a police officer, my daughter is a police officer. That's been my world. I worked at the state attorney's office where I was working with victims of crime, of sexual assault, of domestic violence, of all kinds of horrible things, families of homicide victims. And so this particular time I was sent to a training in South Florida, and it was at a treatment facility for sex offenders. It was really, they say treatment facility, it was a prison. It was a prison. And we were in a great big room, and there were maybe 100 people total. There was about, half the room was the offenders. The other half of the room was the helper people, the therapists and the social workers and the victim advocates and the doctors and all those people. And the facilitator stands in the middle of the room, and she looks over to the side where the offenders are, and she asks them by a show of hands, how many of you were abused as children? And how many hands do you think went up in that inside of the room, right? Almost all of them. I don't think it was all, but almost all of them. Then she did a thing that rocked my world, totally changed everything for me. She looked over on the other side of the room and she said, by show of hands, how many of you were abused as children? And what would you guess the number of hands that went up? Almost all of them. Now here's the part that I've not really shared, is that my hand was up as well. And it was the first time I had disclosed. The first time I did that. Totally blew my mind. So here is an event that happens to somebody, a horrible thing. Everybody in that room had been affected by this terrible thing. And some people ended up on this side of the room, and some on this side. And I spent the rest of my professional career trying to figure out, why do people end up on one side or the other? And what can we do to keep this whole thing from happening in the first place, so none of us are sitting in this room? And I feel like I got some really, really good answers, and it's part of why I do the work that I do here. Right? It's about showing people greater possibilities. It's about letting them know that the things that knock you down, that the pain and the wounds that you have don't have to define who you are. So I spent all that time, these 30 years, thank you. Oh, there goes the holy water again. Anyway, I spent all those years trying to figure that out. And I thought that's what my life's work was. And then I became a minister. And then I had the opportunity, the wonderful opportunity, to do some volunteer work at the prison in Toastmasters. I never expected to work with prisoners, especially not men. That was another shocker. And the shock that I found when I went into that space and found people who were creative and funny and hurting, but just everything. I mean, it's a microcosm of what we find out here. That is the truth of it. There are human beings back there behind those prison walls. And so I've been doing classes with these folks and along with other volunteers from our center. We've always spent a lot of time at the prison. And I have realized now through this work that my life isn't just about figuring out how one person ends up on one side of the room or the other. The work that I'm up to right now is moving people from one side of the room to the other. You see, and I don't mean those particular offenders. I'm talking about anyone in general, anyone who has been hurt, anyone who has been wounded, that we can all take that pain and allow it to be the catalyst for something much better. Not just in our own lives, but in the lives of our community. And isn't that something we need now? Right, here we go, another school shooting, another shooting. How many more have to happen before we wake up? Right? Before we change, before we make the changes within ourselves. We're waiting for change to happen out there somewhere. You gotta be waiting forever. Because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. We have to change ourselves. We're here to change ourselves so that the world out here will change. Now, I've had incredible successes with these gentlemen, and I've shared some of those. And what's come up for me is an expansion of that vision. So I want to talk about who we are as Oak Brook. What is our vision as Oak Brook Center for Spiritual Living? And Donna led us in speaking that. Oak Brook is recognized as a model center for spiritual living, as evidenced by the transformational impact we have on our spiritual community. That's on us in here. On the CSL organization, the greater organization. That's why we want to be a model here. I want to put something together, we, our board, all of us, put something together that other people look at it and go, I want to do that. We want to do what they're doing in Ocala. Look at the difference that they're making in their own community. We want to do that, and I want to be able to give them the book and say, this is how we did it. And to change our community. To change our community. Because we have a teaching here that changes lives. It not only changed my life, I proved it for myself. And I thought, oh, that's awesome that it worked for me. And it's principles that I learned from other people who use them and changed their lives. Well, now I've gone into what I think is probably one of the darkest places you can go, right? Behind prison walls. And teach these very same principles and watch their lives change in real time. Right? I thought I was going in to give them ideas for how they could change their lives and how things could be great when they got out of prison. That's not the case. I learned very quickly that the tools and the principles that I was sharing were ways for them to make their lives better even behind bars. I'm now even working with some people who will never leave that place. So it behooves them all to make it a more livable experience for everyone, including the guards, including the administration, right? Because there's less violence, there's less problem. When people are educated, when they have purpose, when they feel like they have a meaning. So I know, I have that conviction that what we teach here and what we practice it, if you work it, it works. So my vision is to share this with as many people as possible. And it's not just my vision, it's the vision of a lot of us. Our mission, to empower individuals to awaken to the power and presence that lies within them and all around them so that they may live their best lives. Right? We want that for ourselves. Do you want to live your best life?
Yes.
Do you want your kids, your neighbors, your friends, your loved ones? This is what we want for everyone to live their best lives. And then the kinds of tragedies that we're seeing will not happen. Because it is hurt people that hurts people. So we have a great, big, giant vision for this place. So I'm gonna just go through some things some of you may know already. This building that we're in here is a building that we own. Oak Brook Center for Spiritual Living owns this property. And I don't know if you can feel it, but the energy in here is pretty big. I feel like we're going to very quickly be outgrowing this space. So we've been talking about this and saying, do we build onto the building? Do we find another location? And we have another idea. I've had another idea for this thing called the Wellness Center. So the Wellness Center idea, I'm going to start there, is we were talking about turning this building, taking some of the rooms that we don't use often during the week. This space gets used Sunday morning, it's used when there's yoga classes, it's used Wednesday evenings, but it's very often sits here empty, as do the offices in the back. So we had this great brainstorm and thought, why don't we rent out those office spaces so people can use them during the week? And invite people who are healers of different types, maybe therapist, maybe a life coach, maybe a Reiki master, maybe a massage therapist. All of those different kinds of people could be using those spaces and renting them on an as-needed kind of basis. And they would have their clientele, and their clientele would come here and they would say, wow, so what is this place, Oak Brook Center for Spiritual Living?
Including our practitioners.
Including our practitioners, sure. And so people would know who we are. So that was the idea. And I had some people come out and take a look at it, and somebody I was hoping might be an investor in the property and kind of help us change the flooring and to just kind of give it a facelift, give the space an uplift. And the person said, it's not really the right space. I wouldn't put money in here. And I felt a little deflated. But then she said, why don't you make this your reentry center? And I thought about that for a moment. So reentry center, that's very interesting. See, when folks get out of prison, imagine what the hurdles are. Many of them have already not cut their ties, but they burned their bridges with family. So family's not always welcoming them with open arms. They have a tough time. Of course, they don't have jobs, so how do they find a place to live? I mean, the problems snowball. So I've been thinking, I would love to have some kind of a place where people could come, transitional housing, where they would get skills, where they would learn the principles that we teach, where they could get maybe even some real life job training. Like we have a business attached to it that could pay the bills essentially for them to be here while they're getting back on their feet. So she said, why don't you make this your re-entry facility? And the more I thought about it, the more perfect it was. Right? We're here in Ocala, which a lot of Marion County is rural. There's not a lot of space in town that accommodates, would accommodate a space like this. So the more I thought about it, again, the more perfect it was. We've got space for gardens, we've got rooms here. It looks like a house, it feels like a house. It's a great, healing, wonderful space. And we need more room. So here's the idea, right? We need more room. Why don't we move to a space that is more in town, where there's more traffic, where people would see us, where they know who we are, and we could have it be to our specifications. Right? And then this space frees up, and it becomes the space for our Center for Peace Building / Women's Transitional Center. So that is the vision. And every time I speak it, I get so excited about it. And yesterday, during the keynote speak, or after the keynote, there was a little Q&A session, and I stood up and I shared with them what I just shared with you this morning. And people started giving me CDs. A woman came over to me, took a $100 bill out of her purse and put it in my hand and said, put this towards your project. Wow. When I spoke this the first time in December, got a check for $500. Here you go, toward the project. Right? So it makes sense. The other piece of the peace building aspect that I want to add to this is to be able to provide trainings for people. And there are models of this. And there's an excellent model, the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building, which happens to be in Gainesville, run by Heart Phoenix. And the Heart has developed relationships with the police department, with the sheriff's office, with the school system. They're going into schools and they're teaching kids conflict resolution. And they're teaching kids how to do conflict resolution with their friends. They're pulling together the police officers and the kids from impoverished neighborhoods where they police, and they put these folks together so they can build relationships, so they can get to know one another as human beings. It makes a difference, right? We talk Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. We need to know one another. We need to be able to look across the aisles and see a human being, not a Republican or a Democrat. Not a white person or a black person or a gay person or a straight person, but another human being. That's what we're talking about here, right? Is seeing people from heart to heart. And that is what is going to change things. That's what's going to change. That is what's going to shift things. Behind bars and out here. Everywhere is when we can start to look at one another as people again. So here's what I'm asking you. We call today Membership Sunday. Membership Sunday. We have a great, big, huge vision. Hashtag 5,000 means we want to touch 5,000 lives by 2020. And I think that's already happening. In fact, I'm taking the 2020 off. I'm saying we're doing it now. Yes. Between our internet presence, between the work that we're doing in our outreaches, with this project of the Wellness Center and the Reentry Center, there are so many lives that are going to be touched in wonderful ways. But it's a big job. It's a great, big, huge job. And it can only be done in community. Now, when I agreed, when I said I would take this position, I really had no interest in being a pulpit minister. Let me just say that. The very last job I had that I was paid for, I did workshops. And I created a half dozen workshops, and I go all over the place with those half dozen workshops. And I didn't have to recreate it every time. Sunday morning, you know, if there's 50 people here, or there were 500, or there were 5, it's the same amount of work on my part, right? It's the same thing, regardless of how many people. It just didn't feel like a good use of my time, to be honest with you. I thought, you know, I'm getting older, I've got grandbabies, I want to use my time well. I'm not sure I want to do this pulpit thing. And then I spoke to a few ministers who were doing it very, very well. I'm talking people with great, big, huge centers. And they said, Cindy, this is what your role is. This is the job of the minister. Your job is to do a transformational Sunday morning service. Have people walk in and feel like their lives are changed because they were there. I was like, oh yeah, I like that. That sounds good. I can do that. And then they said, the other thing is to cast a vision, right? To help people see the bigger picture. And that was exciting. Right? I'm an idea person. I'm not a detail person. I'm an idea person. They come fast and furious, and I get excited, and I get lots and lots of ideas. So that was fun. And I'm waiting for them to say, when you have to, all the stuff I didn't like to do. That's what I was waiting for next. But no, the next thing they said, your job is to create leaders. Nothing else. Right? Do a Sunday morning service, cast a vision, create leaders. That got me excited. That got me excited. Because that's what we need to be. That's what we need to be. Each one of us can be the leaders in our own circle of influence and start being the change that we want to see in this world. So that's exciting to me. Right? We're small enough now that all of the people that buy into this crazy idea, this crazy notion that we can change the culture behind prison walls, that we can change our community, you know, all those dreamer people, those are the kind of people that come here. Look around you. Look around you, right? It's a special group. It's a special group. So I'm asking you to get involved. To get involved in some way. Because we need your support. All of these ideas don't happen without a little elbow grease and a little green. Let's just be real about it, right? Right? It takes money to do these things. This Sean Pica, who did all this work and who's doing all this amazing work in New York, he doesn't even get state money or federal money. Everything that they have done, the millions and millions of dollars that they have been put into these projects, have been given by individual donors, by people who could see the bigger vision, right, and had the resources, obviously, to do that. So I know that not everyone has the kind of funds to do something like that. I know that we all have different talents. As I said, I'm a big picture person. I'm not the detail person. Okay? I'm not the one you want making the schedule. And if you want me there on time, tell me I need to be there a half hour earlier. So understand we all have different talents and abilities. And so I'd like to hand out, who's got our, excellent, Shanna's got our list here, and I need a couple of helpers. And then I'm going to ask, well, I'm going to introduce you one to Norma before you, Norma, hand that to somebody else, because I want you to say a little something here. Norma is our volunteer coordinator. And so what you're getting there is a two-sided sheet. One side has what your interest might be. The other side says where you would be interested in committing. And so I just want to talk to one of my right-hand people here, Norma, and have her share with you why she's committed to this place.
Because my wife tells me to. No, really, I can remember 10, 11 years ago when we first started coming here, and it was a nice place to be. I loved all the people, but not until I did my first act of service here that I actually felt like I was a part of the center. And it just, from there, I just wanted to do more. And I started out with just a little role, you start out maybe welcoming people at the front door. Then the more you get involved, the more you feel fulfilled, and the more you want to share your gifts that you have with other people. And I just want to invite all of you guys to give a little of your time. I mean, you're probably already doing your treasure, and you have talents. We'd love to have you in the choir or other things you might want to do. But just find a little niche, find something that you enjoy doing, what's your passion, and share it with the center. Let us see what you got.
Real quick, there are 2 sheets. One is a membership covenant and one's double-sided. Everyone make sure you have 2 sheets in your hand.
The membership covenant is something I just want you all to take a look at. You know, of what it means to be a member of a spiritual community. And I don't want that one back. In fact, when we send the baskets around later, if people want to put their interest sheets in the basket, that would be great. We're doing it after service. I hate high pressure things, and I don't want anyone to feel like they're pressured in any way, but more that this is something that they're excited about and would love to be a part of in helping us get this vision really going. We've been doing lots of planning already. The meetings will be starting for both aspects of the center. For the transitional housing portion of things, we will be having visioning sessions for that and gathering a group of people, which will be a lot of members of the community, of folks outside of Oak Brook. The Wellness Center aspect will also be another very important piece of what we do, also another part of our community outreach, and we will be having visioning as well as meetings to help get that project off the ground. And we're going to need a crew of people to go out there and be looking around Ocala for new spots for us to go.
Yes.
Right, a kind of search team. So there's all kinds of things, and there are always things that need to be done here. There are always things, you know, it's a building like every other. There are maintenance kinds of things, outdoor stuff, there's clerical things. There are the various ministries within our center, like our youth department. So just want you to be thinking about that. We are having a membership meeting after service, March 18th. That is our brunch Sunday. And that is the day that we will be voting for new board members. We'll be doing basically the State of the Union of the center and going over the financials. And so anybody who's interested in the business aspects of the church, or just to know what the plans are for the next year, be a part of that meeting. Yes, Shannon?
If they want to think about it over the week and bring it back next week to put in the offering basket, that would be okay?
Yes, that would be great. That would be wonderful. That would be awesome. Shanna said, if you don't need to bring it back today, if you don't want to do that, bring it next week. You want to think about it and see how you want to commit, by all means, that would be wonderful. Richard, would you like to say a few words? I'd love for you to say a little something here. And you know, if you're on our board, would you stand up? Our board members. You're on there. There's Lita back there. You can stand up for Gail. I want you to see who the leaders are in our center. These are people who have committed their time, their talent, and their treasure. And by their treasure, I mean that they tithe to the center. They're that committed that they give 10% of everything that they get, and they give it to the center. That's how committed they are. And so let's give them a hand, just give them a round of applause. Thank you.
I am rich.
Yes, you are.
And at one time I didn't believe that, but I do now. And I've been a student of Science of Mind for about 30 years. Started at a center in the suburbs of Chicago, And at first I was a little scared to go there because at the time it was called Science of Mind. And I wasn't so sure about that. But first time I went, I knew I was home. I just felt the truth of it, that it was for me. And I've been coming ever since, and I started taking classes and learning more about it, and learning how to treat for myself, and I've had a lot of manifestations, both in material things, physical healings, prosperity, and I've taken classes on prosperity, and 3 T's, Prosperity Plus, and Edwin Gaines, and it was through that I took a leap of faith and started tithing. And I found out that it really works. You know, I am not a millionaire, but I have all that I need whenever I need it, and I have more than enough to share with others and in my spiritual home. And when I moved here to Florida, I was so grateful this center was here. And Reverend Cindy is probably the best teacher I've ever had. I'm so grateful for her and for this center. It's important for me to give back, not just financially, but also tithing of my time and talents. And I get involved. I'm in the tech department, do what I can where I can, and I'm just so excited. This center is one that's actually living its vision, its values, and mission, and I'm just so excited about where it's going, and I'm so glad to be a part of it and want to help it get to where it wants to be. Thank you.
Such a quiet, wonderful strength he has there. So yeah, we have a big vision. We do. I think it's important. In the past, we kind of kept things a little to ourselves. The name Science of Mind, like, oh gosh, we don't want people to think we're weird. Or, the inevitable questions come up and people say things, you look us up online, they say all this crazy stuff. But it's people who have not walked in, who don't know, who are speaking from, I don't know what, from ignorance, right? From ignorance, or from fear, or from any number of other things. So I think as a movement maybe, we have not been as out there as we could. Most people are shocked to find out that this place has been here for over 30 years. Right? Over 30 years, 33 years I think we celebrate this year. This place has been here. And it's been in the same building. It's time for a change. It is time to take this to the next level. The craziness that we're seeing in our world is just calling for it. I know for myself, as a mother, as a wife, as a grandmother, now as a grandmother with my 2 babies. Oh, and I guess I'll let you know, the 3rd one is supposed to arrive in October. My 2 grandbabies last year, I'm getting another one this year. I'm so excited. Jess and Jason are having another one, so we're hoping for the girl this time. Anyway, all of these things just motivate me more. It motivates me more. I want to leave this place better than I found it.
Yes.
Right? Can anyone else relate to that?
Yes.
Yeah, do this. We don't inherit the world from, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children.
Yes.
Right? I love that quote. Yes, we don't inherit the world from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And we want to leave this better. And what we have now is not good.
But it's changing.
But it is changing. It is changing. It is changing. And I know that it's possible. I was at a ministerial retreat in September with Dr. Ken Gordon and my peers. Cheers again. Anyway, it was a wonderful, beautiful, heart-opening, just kind of experience. And everybody's sitting around at the end like they don't want to go home. We're all just basking in this love and this joy and this feeling of oneness. And people are saying, oh gosh, I don't want to go back to the real world. And Dr. Ken said, and this will stay with me the rest of my life, he said, this is the real world. This love, this joy, this feeling, this connection, that's the real world. And our task is to create it out there. Our task is to have people feeling that sense of unity and oneness and love and joy that we feel in places like this and experiences like that, and recreate it. Recreate it in our homes and in our communities. That's our task. And I ask you to join us in making that possible, in facilitating that vision. Because we don't make it happen, we simply allow it. We allow it, but it requires that we all step up. That we all step up.